Hey guys, we are live. Thank you so much for tuning in to Blockchain Banter today. I'm Jen, I'm your host. We're going to be discussing a topic that I feel the industry seems to be divided on. It's, does arbitrage cause IL? I've got Dr. Mark Richardson here, project lead at Bancor and Carbon DeFi. I've got Joshua Baker, CEO at Aori, and I've got Vitaly here, the CEO of Spark. Vitaly, we have not had you as our guest yet, so welcome to the panel. Maybe you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit about yourself, maybe just a brief intro.
Sure. I'm the CEO at Spark. Spark is an order book, essential limit order book on Fuel Network. We're mainly building on Fuel Network. We've selected this stack because Fuel is the only parallelizable virtual machine to date on the Ethereum ecosystem. I think Monad and Mega ETH will be the second and the third. I was building on Solana for a couple of years, and we've been very used to parallelization there. I was doing growth at Mango Markets and was very sad when it had a price manipulation attack. And I had a bunch of stability issues on Solana before. So I thought, why don't we build Serum, but on Ethereum, the order book that can be used for on-chain execution for these like 600 perp dexes and other derivatives that are coming up. So that's the big vision behind Spark. We're launching in July. We're launching with the following setup. We're going to have perps and spot on top of the order book, and we're going to have lending and borrowing to leverage the positions. And it's lending and borrowing for the early ecosystem, like one where we launch, is also a very good setup.
Amazing. Congratulations on the upcoming launch.
Thank you. Working hard.
Of course. I see Caezor also joined us. Caezor, I'm sorry I didn't get to intro you with the rest, but we've got Caezor here. He is the creator of Caezor Snack Sandwich. He's a DeFi, I would say, enthusiast and educator, content creator. Caezor, can you hear us okay? I know you were trying to get your mic
I can hear.
Perfect.
Am I able to be? Okay, great. Yeah.
Yep. No, you're loud and clear. Okay, so guys, I wanted to start it off with, obviously we're talking about, does arbitrage cause IL? Before we get into that, I've seen different ways of arbitrage even being described, as it being some sort of a malicious action, some sort of market equilibrium. Maybe I can get how you define arbitrage and how you define IL first. Any one of you want to start us off?
Sure. An arbitrage trade is just a risk-free trade. That's it. That there should be no matter of opinion. This is its definition. In the context of blockchains and DeFi and AMMs and so forth, it is the most typical manifestation of it is the ability to buy a token from one set of liquidity pools and then sell that token on a different set of liquidity pools at a higher price. And this means that if you start with, let's say, 100 USDC to begin that trade, you end up with the same 100 USDC that you started with plus some delta. And that is how arbitrage works. IL is as well, I think, has a very rigid definition. It is essentially the performance of the portfolio on an AMM versus the performance of the same position had it been hodled rather than committed to the short gamma or short straddle trading strategy that an AMM represents. It's a way of, I think, evaluating the performance of that financial instrument. And there is some dispute, I would say, about how that performance should be measured. So, for example, I think using the HODL position as numeraire is the natural way to do that because it generalizes extremely well. Whereas if you're comparing it to, for example, the US dollar or something like that, you can get a very skewed perspective on exactly what's occurring. This could be, for example, if the market is in a very strong downtrend or a very sudden downtrend. If you're measuring it versus the US dollar, it would look like the AMM has performed horribly. whereas the AMM may have not really done anything. So, for example, if you're providing liquidity with something like, staked ETH derivatives versus each other, even if no one is trading with them, if the price of ETH is in a very sharp decline, then you would measure the losses on the AMM to be quite high. And that's not a function of anything that the AMM is doing, but more just reporting on the price of the assets contained within it. And so I think the way you denominate the value of an AMM position is the only thing that's in dispute. But the actual definition, I think, is rigid and shouldn't be up for debate. I think that one of the things that does muddy the water maybe a little bit is when you are considering the motivations of the people that, for whom you are attributing impermanent loss. This is, I think, a more valid, source of ambiguity than anything else. But again, we're trying to measure the performance of the financial instrument itself. And if someone is, happy to take a loss because they're exiting from a position or whatever, I've heard many such arguments in the past. That's fine, but it doesn't change the, it shouldn't change our perspective on whether or not the underlying financial instrument is financially performant or not. So yeah, to sort of wrap that up, I think that arbitrage is well defined and shouldn't be a matter of debate. It's just a risk-free trade, however that happens to manifest. And IL is just the performance of a short gamma or short straddle position versus not having that position in the first place.
Thank you, Mark. Vitaly, Josh, Caezor, do any of you guys want to add? Go ahead. Who was that? Caezor?
Yeah, that's me. Yeah. I would even go so far as to say that there's no such thing as IL. People. Let me explain this clearly. People before when AL first started coming out and being a term that was widely used and thought about, people were comparing providing liquidity to Uniswap to providing ETH or something on Aave, because there wasn't a lot of choice. So people were looking at, if I put my ETH on Aave, I get more ETH, plus I get Aave tokens or whatever they were lend at the time. If I put my ETH into Uniswap, I lose. I get IL, right? Because of the nature of EL. But if you kind of consider what Mark has said in his sentences there, that providing liquidity to a liquidity pool is actually a trading strategy. You are actually saying, I want to sell some of these tokens. I'm willing to sell some. I'm willing to buy some and trade them. If you consider that, then you have to take in the fact that you're not the same person as someone holding the token or someone putting it into a single-sided lending platform or something like this.
It's an interesting argument. I'm curious, Vitaly, do you have something you want to add to this? Because you are doing lending and borrowing, and we haven't heard from you yet. What is your take on IL, especially, in the context that Caezor had just given?
Well, it's a good point. And listen, so from the early days, our product has been targeted to actually fix the problem of the impermanent loss, because our flagship thing is an order book, and it's supposed to, have either no impermanent loss or less of that. Of course, it depends on the implementation as well. You're getting a tiny impermanent loss if you have pools, but it's part of the show. It's how the stack would work. It's kind of normal, I would say. And if you lend the liquidity to the order book, you can, what's it called? Hedge your positions essentially in the pools to minimize it even further. Hope it makes sense.
Yeah. And Josh, do you want to add to this one?
I guess the original question was the header question, correct? IL and impermanent. Yeah. So I think, to an extent, I hate to be that guy, but factually speaking, arbitrage.
Be that guy.
Arbitrage does not cause impermanent loss. By definition, impermanent loss is like a portfolio risk problem with the having a market where there's only one market maker, and you have a predefined payoff structure. Arbitrage is, if anything, price discovery causes impermanent loss, or volatility causes impermanent loss, not arbitrage.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's a pretty straightforward answer, and I kind of, Vitaly and I are both like, notoriously order book maxis. Yeah, I mean AMMs have places, and I do agree. I think Vitaly's more lenient on that than me, but yeah, it's kind of like a solved thing that now I think, luckily, hopefully, partly due to us on this program, people are now aware of the risks, regardless of what some people have tried to say. People are now aware of the risks of an AMM, at least, which is like something that like I'm really happy with. It's like, look, if you understand what's happening when you LP to a pool or two-sided liquidity pool, that's your prerogative, man. Have fun. So yeah, I think at least now people understand that, which I'm very happy about. So yeah.
Okay,
It's worth
so
pointing-
Josh, go ahead, Mark.
It's worth pointing out that the impermanent loss calculation can be applied anywhere. You're just comparing two different financial instruments, and in this case, we're calling HODL a type of financial instrument. Literally just waiting out the market. And being an order book or whatever, or a lending protocol doesn't get you out of the woods. The same argument applies. I can have a look at someone trading on Coinbase and say, look at their position to sell Bitcoin when it reached $55,000 or something, and then see Bitcoin career up to close to 80K, and then go, look, they have this impermanent loss. If they had held on to their Bitcoin longer, they could have sold it higher. And that is an important realization, is that IL is a general phenomenon. It's not something that's implicit or intrinsic to liquidity pools. What you're essentially doing is comparing it to what would have been a better decision. You are evaluating someone's financial choices, and you're always comparing it to a very some optimal standard. Like, we don't necessarily have to compare it to HODL. You could compare it to, I think this is the point that Ceazor was making. You could compare it to, having a position on Aave, which shouldn't have any sort of downside risk, at least in theory, and then say, you know what, that's my benchmark. I'm going to compare everything to that. Or you could say, we can compare it to, staking assets on Gearbox protocol, for example, or compare it to, staking something somewhere else, which might have an incentives campaign, associated with it, and say, look, your loss versus this other thing is some percentage or is some dollar value, and that would be your IL, because, and we say that, those losses are impermanent because, maybe the lending protocol or something has an issue, and now, the funds are no longer withdrawable, and you would take a loss there, and now whatever your other position is doing looks like it's actually outperforming that position. But it's not we shouldn't treat it as being something that is an explicitly liquidity pool derived consequence, or a consequence of the way that liquidity pools operate. A liquidity pool is just an option, right? Depending on who you speak to, they might want to categorize the LP position as being a type of of selling puts or whatever, and that's fine. But the point that I'm making is that just because you've got an order book doesn't mean you don't have IL. It just means that people aren't upset about it anymore because they have agreed to buy and sell tokens at the prices that they have nominated. And I think that it's a psychological phenomenon in liquidity provision and in liquidity pools and AMMs that people are upset about their impermanent loss because they feel like it was something that they didn't have any agency in deciding, that's a risk that they didn't agree to take on. And there is some merit to that. the way that AMMs are marketed and the type of messaging that is used to attract liquidity providers does a very poor job of explaining to them exactly what it is that they're going to be doing with the tokens that are provided there. And so when people say, I provided, 10 ETH and however many USDC to Uniswap V2 back in 2019 and tried to withdraw it, and now I've got almost no ETH left, but I've got all of this USDC, but it's not enough to compensate for that difference. There is very little, in terms of, what's presented on the product front end that could have prepared someone for that eventuality. You'd need to dig very deep into the supporting documentation to really understand what it is you're buying when you provide, liquidity to some of these protocols. So I think that is an important distinction. While IL is a general phenomenon, right? IL exists in real estate. It exists in trading coffee futures. It exists in every financial instrument. It's always present. The difference is that when you're buying those other financial instruments, you generally understand the risk that you're taking and you accept the consequences. Whereas when you're buying the financial instrument represented by an AMM, in general, people don't understand the financial instrument they're buying, and they don't accept the consequences because they feel like it was done to them rather than something they did to themselves.
You have to understand the financial illiteracy of some of these people. They were handed basically a Avondella market making strategy, and like the concept of a mean reverting strategy just like broke everyone's brains. Like no one could understand that. They were like, it led to like 5,000 papers being written about it, like all that shit. But yeah, it's I get nervous now when I see like even more complicated financial instruments coming on chain. I'm just like, uh-oh, like this is kind of
that's part of this. Sorry.
Go ahead, Vitaly. No. Go ahead. Keep going.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, first of all, I agree 100% with Mark, and I just wanted to double down to both of you guys. I'll start with Josh. So yeah, financial literacy is the beauty. I mean, the inclusiveness, or how do you say it? Inclusivity of this industry is the beauty, and also the horror of this space, because you get all sorts of people entering with all sorts of backgrounds, of course. But as a developer, we, as a company that builds a financial tool, we provide, our customers, of course, they have P&L, and we talk to them do you want AMM, do you want pools? Yeah, sure. Okay, impermanent loss. Yeah, but we have P&L that we can, hedge our risks even within the product. So yes, Mark, you're absolutely right there. I think providing several products within one app is just one of the ways to resolve the problem we just discussed.
I have okay, speaking of the problem, I have 2 questions that were submitted here. So I am going to tell me if you guys see this up on your screen. Could the question be rephrased to arbitrageurs get a lot of profits during price shift and liquidity providers suffer IL, right?
Not necessarily.
Next.
No.
Yeah, I mean.
Okay, wait. Let's go back then. Okay, we'll go back. You guys discuss.
Mark, you
Okay. Okay, so arbitrageurs get a lot of price during a price shift and liquidity providers off the IL. Okay, there can be more arbitrage opportunities when there's a patchwork sort of market and there's price discrepancies between different exchanges. That's a fair enough observation. But the price shift itself is what causes the IL, and it's not necessarily true that those price shifts are guaranteed to result in more arbitrage opportunities. So for example, and this is kind of the litmus test and a helpful thought experiment to people that are wrestling with this distinction for the first time, is that I was once advising a protocol that was going to launch their own token, but they were going to launch it on their own liquidity pool. And it was the only place where that token was available. And it was, paired versus ETH, for example. And it was very popular. People liked the token a lot. And so a lot of people bought that token. But there is no arbitrage, right? There's nowhere else that you can buy or sell that token. It wasn't available for lending or borrowing. It was just this one liquidity pool, nothing else. And because it was so popular, the token price went up quite a lot, right? As is the the price discovery mechanism that AMMs support. And when I spoke to the team, I was like, you realize that there's compared to the token valuation that you started with, you actually have experienced some IO. And they said, no, because there are no other liquidity sources, it is impossible for this token to experience IO. And that is a big problem, right? Now, of course, in this particular case, we can go down all kinds of dark alleys where we say, yeah, but they printed that token themselves. It doesn't really matter. What they're really doing is a token raise, and the fact that they're selling tokens for ETH, they've now obtained some value and that kind of thing. But this is besides the point. The point that I'm trying to make is that there was a very large price shift, and if you just apply the IL calculation verbatim, you will measure one, and no one in that system obtained any arbitrage profits at all. There was no arbitrage at all. So that is an example where there is just a price shift resulting in IL, and not a single arbitrageur made a profit at all. What can occur is when people, like during a market trend, if people are congregating around a single exchange, the price on that exchange can move more dramatically than it is on the less popular exchanges. And that is when the arbitrageurs will start to profit. But the question is, who are they profiting from? Because the people that are congregating on a single exchange, they are buying tokens at a higher valuation than they're available somewhere else, right? If you're on Amazon or eBay or something and you just sorted prices lowest to highest for the tokens that you were buying, you would realize that the exchange that you're trading on is not the right exchange, right? Go and buy a Bitcoin from OKX or something at a discount compared to the premium that you're paying on Binance, something like that. In that situation, the people that are selling the Bitcoins on OKX are selling them at a slight discount. The people that are selling them on Binance are selling them at a slight premium. If I choose to buy it at a premium on Binance, buy it at a discount on OKX and then sell it at a premium on Binance, who did I profit from, right? Because the people that I bought it from on OKX will complain that I didn't pay more because Binance's prices were higher. And the people on Binance will complain that I am selling the Bitcoin that I bought at OKX to them at a higher price than what I bought it for than what I bought it for previously. This is the same situation as, if I sell my car to a friend and he turns around and sells it to his friend at a higher price. Did the third person at the end of this chain, did they get screwed because they could have bought the car from me at a cheaper price? Or did I get screwed because I could have sold it to the person at the end of the chain at a higher price? The truth is, no one is getting screwed. There is just people trading at prices that they agreed to trade at. And while you may regret it later, because you may have accessed that other customer and being able to get either a cheaper price buying it or demand a higher price selling it. There is no universal truth. So it's not the case that arbitrageurs get a lot of profits during price shifts. Those arbitrage profits will only become apparent if there is a discrepancy between different exchanges, and you only have the people that are buying things at a premium to blame for the fact that those profit opportunities exist in the first place. If they were making better decisions, there would be no arbitrage ever, and that would describe, relatively speaking, a hyper efficient market, which simply doesn't exist.
Yeah, I would. The only comment I would add is just like in the world of today, outside of a theoretical one exchange world, there is a significant correlation between arbitrage profit and volatility. I use the word volatility instead of price shift just because volatility means it's price movement over a period of time, I suppose, is a way of looking at it, or change in price over time. So yeah, it's definitely it is correlated, but second, it's just factually speaking, no, impermanent loss has nothing to do with arbitrage. So yeah,
back to it. We're just gonna keep saying this is ridiculous. No. Vitaly, do you want to add to this? Because there's a second part, and Calvrac, I want to thank you, by the way, I know I added a comment here, but I want to thank you for adding your comments and questions. There's a second part to this. I'm going to show this here. Which mechanisms could be created to transfer gains from arbitrageurs that have no risks, only gains, to liquidity providers?
I would also like. Oh, sorry, Jen.
No, that's okay. I want to kind of break that down a little bit, and even like there's a couple parts. It's one short, question statement, but I think there's a couple different areas in here we might want to address. Josh, wanted to.
I don't want to answer. I just want to add on to the question. Like, the obvious answer to this is like auctions. But I would love. I wanted to segue this into Vitaly. Vitaly, give me your take on auctions and like order books as like a venue for auctions, etc. Like, yeah. Run with this one.
Well, I would say that there are many ways to approach this, and actually, most of the DeFi products, arbitrageurs somehow pay for impermanent loss of the customers for the to the liquidity providers. So what is happening is protocol is gaining fees, and it actually compensates. I mean, it doesn't compensate per se, but the LPs will come to you and show you the what's the balance sheet and tell, okay, this is our permanent loss. You got to compensate it, bro. Or and this is what Spark does, and this is what Aori does as well. You can hedge. So we have like an order book, and we have perps and lending and borrowing within one product. So what is happening? There is an arbitrage between spot and perp, and so in some sense, arbitrageurs, they pay the LPs to the pools in the lending protocol. They compensate their impermanent loss by trading within perps. That's one way to improve it. Another way that also Josh just mentioned is auctions. You can have several vaults, but that's like an automated OTC deal essentially. Yeah, Josh, maybe you want to continue on this one.
Yeah, this is like a really interesting like part of crypto right now, like that people don't know a ton about, which is just like you're definitely right. Like they are currently being somewhat compensated, but right now it's not the LPs being compensated as much as it is the validators on Ethereum. Yeah, I think like there are some really cool attempts at this. Like the first and most famous is Caezor. Caezor is like a direct attempt at this, basically by auctioning off your liquidity to solvers, and instead of it going to the validators, it goes to the off-chain solver that gets chosen or provides the highest bid. There are some other like improvements in that. Like, I mean, Uniswap X is an attempt at this. It's basically a slightly worse version of Caezor. Another cool one that's coming out is Sorella. Sorella Angstrom is doing this with their product they're building. Dave White published a good paper on like what I believe, I have no inside information, what I believe the auction mechanism will be, which is basically this distributed like auction house mechanism that they use for an auction system. Yeah, this is like a particularly cool thing. There's also one I read about. From what their original paper or their original like announcement on it, it was called Orange Finance, and they were trying to do this too, where it's basically like kind of better version of Uniswap X, where on UniV4 it's a hook built in that basically allows an off-chain auction to occur to arbitrage the pool, and in theory that the bids on the arbitrage will be equivalent to the profit from the arbitrage, and that goes back to the LPs. And so that's another cool way you can do it. Yeah, this is like a particularly cool area in crypto. People people should check out or pay attention to.
Yeah, I want to add to this discussion first with honorable mention to 1inch and 1inch Fusion, which has like a lot of similarities to CowSwap, and I consider these to be pretty, like, they're almost redundant in terms of the way that they work. Obviously, they have different solvers, so you might get a better price occasionally on CowSwap just because someone is more aggressively bidding, and sometimes you get a better price on 1inch Fusion. But more or less, same idea. The thing that I wanted to point out, and this is in no way contradicting anything that anything that we've heard from the other two guests, is that the time resolution of the of how you're evaluating it matters a lot. Okay, I need to explore something here. Give me 2 seconds. Let's say that you are an LP on an AMM, and based on the AMM, mechanism, it says that your Bitcoin is selling for, let's just say, 50K. And the prices on Coinbase and Binance are already at 51K. And so this is, if the market was able to accommodate LPs updating their prices very quickly, rather than waiting for your Bitcoin to sell up to 51K, what you would probably just want to do is just mark the price out at 51 or very close to 51. And this is what the auction essentially allows to happen, is that if someone says, oh yeah, I'll buy that, for 14, for 50, 50.5, someone else might come in and say, I'll buy it for 50.6, 50.7, and eventually you will bid, they will bid up the price very close to the equilibrium price, and that means that the liquidity providers are going to be selling their tokens at a slightly higher price. And this is exactly what people should be talking about, is not necessarily the ability to stop arbitrage, but the ability to reprice your stuff. But on a long time frame, your IL will be exactly the same, or it will be very similar. Because if you are auctioning off your Bitcoin very close to 51K, and then next week the price of Bitcoin is at 75, you are still going to be suffering an enormous amount of impermanent loss because of that. And this is the point, is that it doesn't really. I think that we need to stop referring to what happens on an AMM as being fee accrual, because there aren't really, like, AMMs don't charge fees, and they never have. What they instead have is a bid-ask spread, and the fee is kind of something that is measured in aggregate, right? It's something that happens over many trades. It's not something that you can get out of a single trade. So even if you are able to bid up the price of your token and sell it at 51 versus 50, you're going to be happy, because on that one trade, you did manage to get a better price because the market was happy to take you at that better price. But that doesn't mean that next week you won't regret it. And so there is no, there is no free lunch. At the end of the day, you're still trading tokens the same way that you would trade anything else. And so if you benchmark your sales price out, near a local bottom, and the market continues upwards, you're going to have IL. It doesn't matter how good that auction process is. It doesn't matter how close to the equilibrium market price you get at the time that you traded. If the market continues to trend, you're still going to feel like you got screwed. And there's no way around that, other than if you want to hodl your tokens, just hodl your tokens. No one's forcing you to trade them. And if you are going to trade them, remember, you are still trading with a particular goal in mind. If you think the market is crabbing, then a short gamma strategy is a really good idea. But if the market is trending, it's a really bad idea. Like, you just shouldn't be selling stuff. You shouldn't be providing liquidity, period. And there's nothing that anyone's going to be able to do to help you. Because if Bitcoin is trading at 50K on Monday and then 75K on Friday, you've just made a bad trade. That's all there is to it. And it's not the arbitrageur's fault. And even if we could get the money back from those arbitrageurs, it would still be very small compared to the losses that you've made.
I'll add a few things here. Like, I think it's all about mindset. Like, people want to have their cake and eat it too, in a sense. Like, they want to hodl, but they also want to make, like, these quote unquote trading fees, right? So that's the problem. Like, if you're going to put if you concentrated liquidity is a very good lesson on what happens inside a liquidity pool to people's tokens. If people don't understand the fact that if you're providing liquidity on any AMM right now, then you are agreeing to sell tokens to the price between this current price and the price that's above, like assuming USDC, ETH, or something like this, right? As long as you understand that, then you should be okay with the fact that when you go to pull your tokens out, you're going to have less ETH, assuming ETH has gone, or the inverse. Like if it's gone down, you're going to have US dollars. Like this is just the result of providing liquidity. And when you provide liquidity to concentrated liquidity, then you see this much faster. It's not impermanent loss, it's your decision. Like it's not the market, the protocol did not make a mistake. You made the mistake to saying, oh, I'm willing to sell in order to gain these quote unquote trading fees, right? Or there's sometimes rewards. Like there are also like additional rewards on like gauges and stuff like that that can also mitigate this loss, hopefully. Two mechanisms that can kind of slow down arbitrage is, there's only two things in the way I look at it. Like have all the liquidity in the same place, right? Because the way I think of arbitrage is simply I sold tokens at a price less than if I had gone manually and sold them somewhere else. The arbitrage took that opportunity from me. I wanted to be passive. I wanted to sit there and do nothing. And because of that, I'm going to sell my tokens cheaper than if they're sold at another place. If all the liquidity is in a single pool, then this won't happen, right? The other mechanism that I can think about that would help this is what I think Mark was like describing, which is just an Oracle-based pricing. So like if we had like a set price, like the liquidity pools were all over the place, but there was an agreed price, an Oracle price for those assets, and the price on all of these liquidity pools was determined by that Oracle price. This might do it as well, but then we are oracles for things, and we know what happens sometimes with oracles, right? Those are the two things that I would see.
Yeah, and even with the Oracle idea, like let's say that we do end up with a perfect Oracle system, which there'll never be one. But even if we had it, it still wouldn't stop IL, because if the Oracle tells you that Bitcoin is trading at 50K on Monday and 75K on Friday, you've still got the IL in between those two periods. So there's really no way out of it. It's just trading well or trading badly.
So
yeah, like the Oracle was just to stop. Sorry, the Oracle was just to stop arbitrage. It's not going to stop IL. I agree with that. It was just to reduce or remove arbitrage.
So if arbitrage, you guys are saying, does not cause IL, then why would we create mechanisms to stop arbitrage if it doesn't lead to IL?
I'm not sure that we are stopping creating mechanisms to stop arbitrage. Like you can, with these auction systems, the ones that Josh is clearly a big fan of, and so am I. What they do is say, how much is this token really worth to you? And allow you to get a better price for that point in time. And that's the difference. If I'm offering my car to my friend and I say, this car costs $2,000 and he looks really excited, I'll be like, what about $2,500? Like I have an incentive to try and get the best price. And this is why haggling and negotiating exists. And, these auction mechanisms allow that to happen in a pretty efficient way. And so those are good mechanisms, but it's not about preventing arbitrage. It's just about, trying to work out exactly what someone will pay for something, getting the highest possible price that you can ask. And on the other side, someone getting the lowest possible price that they can buy it for. And you come to an agreement and, make an exchange. That's just how things should work.
Okay. Josh, Vitaly, Caezor, do you guys want to add to this at all before I?
Yeah. I'll add one thing. Mechanisms sell tokens, so there's also that factor. If I'm able to that my product is reducing arbitrage, then more people will put their assets into my protocol, and then my protocol will create more revenue for token holders and or team and stuff like this. So there's also that factor as well, like it sells.
Okay. So if liquidity providers are getting more of these gains that the arbitrageurs would, then more liquidity providers would not be so maybe hesitant to provide liquidity on your DeFi protocol. Is that what you're saying, Caezor?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. And that's just one other factor. Like, obviously, there is the tech, there is the research and all that, and the respectful aspect of it. But there's also that factor of, oh, when I say that my protocol has this feature, then like more likely liquidity providers will use it because people are fickle and they want new tech, right?
Yeah. Okay. So in this world, though, then I have a question. You know, if we're taking these gains that the arbitrageurs are getting and we are giving them to the liquidity providers, well, let me ask you this. We've already established that you guys don't think that arbitrage causes IL, right? And it plays a role in kind of creating this sort of equilibrium, right? There's a trade to be made. It makes that trade. It's pretty much that simple, unless you guys want to, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, right? But if we're taking the gains that the arbitrageurs are making and we're giving them to the LPs, then what? Is there no incentive now for the arbitrageurs?
Then the arbitrager won't trade with you. Period. Like, you'll just find a price where they will refuse to trade. And
will that have an effect on the overall industry then?
The volumes will go down.
Okay.
A lot of trading volume is arbitrage volume, and that's okay. Like, it's not necessarily that the arbitrageurs are like a parasitic influence or something.
Right.
If someone trades on SushiSwap and moves the price on that pool versus another pool, if both of those pools were quoting the same price, you might argue that the liquidity providers that didn't get that trade are going to be upset, right? That they're both offering the same price. They might be like, hey, we're offering the same price. Why did you trade with that pool and not with me instead? The arbitrageur will essentially backrun the fat-fingered transaction and redistribute that trade across both pools equally. That's actually, in a way, is a service. And this is what people are, this is what motivates people to argue that arbitrage is a type of like market efficiency service. I don't necessarily see it that way, but I understand where they're coming from. And so, yeah, it has nothing to do with whether or not arbitrage is a suck on the market or not. The market is or isn't efficient regardless of whether arbitrageurs are there or not. It's just whether or not the people that are interacting with that market are doing so in a rational way. And in general, people aren't, right? People still use AMM front ends and DEX front ends to make trades when they should be using an aggregator every time. And that's on them. That's their mistake. And so the trader who makes that decision to pay a higher price than they could have got somewhere else, it's really their mistake that everyone is capitalizing on. And the arbitrageur is just distributing that mistake across the pools that they choose to interact with. And that's what, it's fine. I don't think that there's it makes sense to try and prohibit it or ameliorate it or something, because it's just not a problem.
I'll add here that like a majority of like front ends now are now integrating DEX aggregators into their swap UX. So it's arbitrage is probably reducing quite significantly in the current like bull market as compared to other bull markets. Just not as a one-to-one, like, because the volume will be up, the TVL's up, but like if you compare it like relatively, I would say arbitrage must be going down. Like, everyone is using DEX aggregators. Well, not everyone, but a lot more people are using DEX aggregators than they were in previous cycles and previous times.
Mark, something that we had previously spoken about, maybe this is a whole nother topic, arbitragers and, arbitragers and aggregators, right? And kind of the similarities and the crossover between the two. We won't get into that like right now. I think it might be a longer conversation. But then I want to, okay, let me kind of wrap this up then. We still have 10 minutes, but I want to sum up this question here because I think what I really want to ask is we're talking about these mechanisms transferring the gains from arbitragers to liquidity providers who do carry this risk, right? And we know this. And liquidity providers, hopefully at this point, they know this also. So Josh, I keep coming back to in my head, it was a call where you're like, just stop using AMMs, right? Is the answer taking these gains from arbitragers and giving them to liquidity providers? Or is it, I'm speaking to 3 CEOs and project leads of order book like systems, right? Or is it this sort of system that's going to eliminate this sort of risk or at least mitigate it, minimize it for liquidity providers?
It's very funny. I was having a conversation with someone who probably more so than anyone on this call, like has spent, which is like a very high bar, has done like incredible amounts of academic research on Uniswap, and one of the and order flow in crypto in general. And one of the things he talked about with me was at the firm he was at previously, where he did this research, they had a debate internally of is the customer of Uniswap the person who comes to the front end and presses the take button, or is it the person who LPs? And which is like a very it's kind of a chicken egg thing, but one of the we both agreed that it's the LP. And if it's the LP and we're correct in theory, then what that means is eventually our LPs will demand better and better products for LPs, or better and better performance for LPs, which will mean that things like CowSwap and CowAMM and Uniswap X, become the norm for LPing, where their order flow or their pools that they're LPing to, they are capturing through whatever scheme a higher and higher percentage of the arbitrage profit. That goes back to the LPs. And if you believe that that is the case, which it has been trending towards, and I believe will continue to be trending towards, then LPs of AMMs will eventually demand such a high percentage of the arbitrage profit that, exactly as Mark said, arbitragers will no longer come and arb these pools because they're just going to be too competitive. It's just going to be, once the spread gets so tight that you might make 5% of the theoretical arbitrage P&L, it's considered already too tight. You can see this already happening with DexX Arb, for example, on Ethereum, where 95 to 97% of the P&L goes to the validator, and the arbitrager keeps 3 to 5% if they're lucky. And you're just wow, this is why would I ever get into this? This sucks. I'm not doing this. I'm going to go trade in more fun things, So I that's my long-term, take on it.
There's another hidden perspective in what Josh has said that was kind of unspoken, but I feel like it's there. And that's that the easiest way to transfer arbitrage gains from arbitrageurs to LPs is have the LPs perform their own fucking arbitrage, right? Just do it yourself. If you're so envious of it, if you're so envious of it, just go and do it. There's nothing stopping you. And you can't be upset. If you start to dig into that and realize how difficult and resource intensive it is, you might start to realize that actually the arbitrage profits are razor thin. There is a huge amount of development lead time. You have to pay for all kinds of services in order to run it correctly. Often the back end needs to be built and maintained a certain way. These are difficult things to do. But there are ways that you can participate. But if you feel like you're incapable or this is beyond your abilities, then I don't think that you have any right to complain about it.
I'll add that the arbitrages, what they actually do for crypto is they allow people who don't want to do that extra work. They don't want to be sophisticated. They want easy gains, or trading fees, or extra rewards on top of it, right? They just
Free
want
money.
something easy and simple. They want free money, and arbitrageurs kind of allow the system to keep going. It's like, oh, I want, it's like life support for someone who's just doesn't want to stop eating terrible food. You know what I mean? Like, if you don't like arbitrage, then it needs to be there. Like, it might not be arbitrage bots, like single entity persons. It might turn into, like what I was saying, like DEX aggregators just being the standard and everywhere. But DEX aggregators are also like arbitrageurs. They are arbitrageurs as well, but sometimes they have mechanics that kind of give some of that arbitrage value back to the trader, or to the person who does the trading, or the person who's providing liquidity. But there's still arbitrageurs. So, like, arbitrageurs need to be there in some manner, and may allow people who don't understand, who don't have the time to look deeper, to at least provide liquidity. And we need more people to provide liquidity to create a good UX, a good experience for all of crypto. It's important that people are encouraged to provide liquidity, so that I can always swap my tokens. I don't have to find somebody to buy my tokens. Like, that's the worst. If you have to, like, hey, do you want to buy my tokens? Like NFTs, like, to me, that's, I don't understand why people want to buy NFTs, because they need to find a person to buy it from them. Whereas there's so much liquidity in ERC20s and fungible tokens that it's very easy to get in and out of positions. I think this makes sense.
It does. It makes perfect sense, Caezor. Thank you. I want to, any final thoughts? Otherwise, I'm going to run through a couple of comments that we got, just kind of show you guys quick kind of
Put in the
fire.
comments.
Okay. Well, we have kind of just questions, comments. Which oracle would be used on fuel? The fact that you're going to be on fuel caught somebody's attention, Vitaly. So which oracle will be used there? Do you know?
Of course, I do know. And I've put a lot of effort to bring those oracles to the ecosystem as well. So that's Pith and Redstone. And that's also a bunch of other, including Orao, that are having a pretty good business on Solana right now. I'm looking towards these oracles because they work well with the parallelizable chains.
Okay.
First of all, and they're pretty good for, like, both Josh and me, essentially, for both, like, options and perps as well, because where you have a lot of transactions and where you have a lot of like, you need a high throughput, high speed oracle, and it should also be cheap. So Chainlink, perps, and options is out. But
Yeah.
Pith is doing great job at what they provide, and we finally have them. And Spark is already has already implemented Pith there. Yeah.
Perfect. We got Lasai here who threw out an arbitrage as a service. So he was feeling good and wanted to throw that in there. Will wanted to let you guys know it was an action-packed call and he loved this one. And speaking of perps, really quickly, and we're at the very top of the hour, but is it possible to get negative maker fees due to funding rates for perps?
Of course. I
Yeah.
mean, the short answer is yes, of course.
If you get filled. If you get filled, I suppose.
Okay. Well, there we have it. Thank you to all of you guys for joining me up here on the panel. It was a wonderful discussion. Thank you. And Vitaly, I know it was kind of last minute, but it was great to have you join us as well. Anytime. I hope you come back. Thank you to all of the audience, to the viewers, to the listeners. We will be back next Wednesday. Every Wednesday we do this at 4 p.m. UTC. So keep an eye out for the next topic. And if anybody has any of their own they want to see our panelists discussing, I definitely suggest reaching out to us. So Thank you guys again. Everybody enjoy your week, and we will see you next Wednesday.
Have a great
Thanks,
one.
Jen. Cheers.
Thanks,
Take care, everyone.
guys.
Thanks for having us.